Hey everybody, this is SIC Talks number 70. Oh man, I don't even know what number it is. Darn it, Viktoriia, I forgot to do the research ahead of time. I'll correct it in post. Anyway, welcome to SIC Talks. I'm here with Viktoriia Vasileva, who's I managed to get that more or less correct, who's actually dialing in from Moscow, which is kind of an amazing first of all the time. So Viktoriia, thanks for staying up late with me tonight. Nice to see you.
Yeah, happy to be here.
Viktoriia is a brand strategist and marketing specialist who works freelance across lots of different projects. She's also a researcher, and I got to know her through a newsletter that she publishes called Vik's Busy Corner. That's VIK Busy Corner. That covers lots of the sort of intersections of marketing, branding, pop culture, youth culture that I find interesting. And I've cited it as a source and taken lots of inspiration from it from time. So I gave her a shout yesterday on very short notice because it's Thanksgiving week and because people are all booked up or, booed up or whatever they are with their families. And I said, Viktoriia, would you jump on? She's like, yeah, great. And then I found out just now that she's in Moscow. So this is like your evening entertainment. Welcome to SIC Talks.
Yeah, no Thanksgiving here, so I'm available.
Yeah, we were joking that Thanksgiving is not really the like a Russian tradition. Speaking of that, you said you grew up off mic. You said you grew up in Russia. How long have you been in the States? Like when did you make over here? What occasioned your trip over?
Yeah, I first came as an exchange student in high school, and
Oh,
then
cool.
I came back after a year. So I spent my college years and then all the years post grad in the US. So it's been a while, maybe 7 or 8 years, something like that.
Got it. And how did you get into the sort of the marketing arts then? What brought you into this universe?
Yeah, it happened kind of by chance. Like I never really set out to work in marketing. I was in college studying economics, and then I just transitioned into a business degree. And then I got really curious about startups and the startup world. And during the pandemic, I was really active on tech Twitter, which is just like VCs and startup founders and anyone interested in startups tweeting. And so I was just like tweeting from my bedroom. No one had anything to do. And
Right.
I did really well on Twitter. And then a startup reached out and they wanted me to do their social media.
Oh,
And
cool.
then after social media kind of spiraled into more like brand marketing, more creative projects, communications, and everything else that I did.
Got it. So it's funny you should say that. Like Twitter has always been a little bit of a bête noire for me, or an albatross. I've never been good at it. I've never wanted to be good at it, so I've never spent any attention on it. But like, what did that mean being good on Twitter? Like, because there's some alchemy there that it obviously eludes me, but I think that some people manage to capture.
Yeah, I think Twitter was good for like writers in 2010s, and then it was really good for people working in tech in during the pandemic.
Right.
Exactly. Being good at Twitter used to be quite a different place than it is now. It's
Yeah.
very For you page focused now, so it's really hard to even find like-minded people.
Sure.
When I was on Twitter, Twitter was sort of like Substack, where it was easy to be sort of just a part of a community. And because the tech community was pretty small, everyone sort of knew each other.
Yeah.
So there was a lot of like VCs tweeting strange things and people having conversations about them. And if you were a young person at the time, VCs really love young people. So everyone wanted to hear from us and
Right.
we wanted attention. So that's what we did.
Okay. So
Um,
you were sort of resident young person
yeah, yeah,
in
pretty
some of these
much.
conversations.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah. Just
Got it.
riffing off of the conversation of the day, basically.
That's funny. I think it's fair to say I started my career as a resident young person at a record label. Around the turn of the century. I'm now like the resident old person hanging around with young people, being like, "Hey, how do you do, fellow kids?" It's really sad. Well, but that's funny. And then I think what I like about that story too is that it illustrates a kind of an organic on ramp into a place both of access and expertise that those sorts of platforms enable if people are willing to put themselves out there
Hmm.
and to take part in and I sort of dislike the term being brave because it just seems like contrived to me, but it's truly, that's what it is. It's like you kind of get out there and just, show people what you got. Okay. And then, so from there, it's working at, this sort of startup and in social media, and then getting more widely into, brands and marketing and so on and so forth. You have an area of specialization or of particular sort of focus that you work on?
No, not really. Now I gravitate towards a lot of copywriting, brand
Okay.
marketing, and communications, mostly like strategic communications. But yeah, in startups I worked at, it was sort of like whatever we needed to do to grow or communicate or to do anything marketing wise. The
Sure.
marketing teams are really small, so I was able to pick up a lot of projects, work on a lot of things. So yeah, I'm more of a generalist.
Got it. And have you ever had any experience, like, on the flip side of that, working in like major, like big corporate structures? Because I think one of the things that strikes me about Vic's Busy Corner, and it's true of as seen on BioChuco, former guest on the show, and Emily Sundberg as well at Feed Me, is there's this real interest in the way those big systems work, as well as an interest in how smaller companies operate. And sometimes that comes from a sense of access to them, and sometimes it just comes from, well, almost like the outside looking in. So it's always interesting to know, like, to what extent you've been in the machine, or you sort of observe the machine from outside.
No, I've mostly just observed it from the outside. Yeah, it never really attracted me as a young person because I wanted to work, like I wanted ownership. Now I kind of want to work at a larger company, to be honest, just because I
Interesting.
feel
Why?
like I want to experience what order feels like. Like I want to see an ROI and like
Right.
deliver
Okay.
on it. I want a deadline and not like, oh, like in the upcoming in 2 weeks, you better
Right.
get to it. So I do kind of want that experience a little bit, but I don't know. It's a matter of like searching for the right person or for the right place at the right
Yeah, I was
time.
going to say,
So I've
what
never
would be a
been able to
dream?
find that.
What would be a dream?
I don't know. At this point, I would like to maybe like be at a larger company that's going through some sort of rebrand or like trying to capture
So
young
Jaguar,
people's
then.
attention or something. No.
So you want it? Okay, got it. So it's
No, I
folks from,
hated
if
that.
you're listening from JLR, Victoria is yeah. Although I do
Oopsie.
want to talk about, let's talk about that for a little bit. So those who listen, are maybe aware that this podcast is meant to be a sort of a companion to the newsletter that I publish on Thursdays, free, under the banner SIC Weekly, and which is a kind of an aggregation of lots of different stories that I've read. It's very much like Vic's Busy Corner in that it aggregates sources. It's less analytical, and there's less of my personal voice in there, which is one of the things that I really like about your work. But the one of the stories, of course, of the last 7 days or 10 days or whatever it is, has been this Jaguar rebrand, where they have taken away the leaper, or whatever they call the cat. They have taken away the classic sort of English style. They've moved to this sort of mix of lower and uppercase type, and they've added some sort of bizarre, like, some say woke, but otherwise like sort of creative fashion fever dream, as a means of representing what the brand is going to be going forward. There's an interesting story that I cited in the newsletter this week that was in Creative Block, that said that there are people that are now speculating that the whole thing was a troll.
Yeah.
And I
I got
wonder, I'd love to hear your take on just, the whole situation.
I just don't like when I get on LinkedIn and I scroll past the feed and it's like 10 posts or 20 posts talking
Right,
about the
right,
same thing. And then the deeper you go, like the more conspiracy theorist
right.
it
Okay, gotcha.
gets. So I did get to the theory, which is like they did this for attention or to like land an SNL sketch about them or something like that. To be honest, I just like didn't really want to pay attention to the whole thing just because it was such a big conversation. I feel like everyone has said everything. Yeah, it kind of looked like an Adobe sort of ad to me.
Uh-huh.
And it was sort of strange because I think like there was a lot of conversation about America in general getting very like conservative, and I feel like that all money rich aesthetic that Jaguar obviously has going for it is going to be trending. So it's a little weird that it's like going in a different direction. Feels like outdated.
Yeah,
But
it's funny you should say that. It's almost like it was one of the things that occurred to me about it. It was like, this feels like it was a campaign made for a Harris presidency, the era of a Harris presidency. And
I
then
don't know.
when that didn't happen, it was like, okay, shit, what do we do?
Yeah,
Like,
that's funny.
I mean, I don't know. I mean, on the one hand, I find it mystifying. Jaguar is a brand that I like and admire, and well, let's call it used to aspire to, and now this thing I found deeply confusing. But I love, my wife is English. I'm very attuned to the sort of Anglophile or anglicized sort of sense of humor, and there would be an element of that absurd piss take, as they would say, in the notion that the whole thing was a joke. The idea of aspiring to an SNL sketch is a little, that's shooting a little low as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah,
but
for Jaguar, I'm sure they're sitting around there thinking about how to land an SNL sketch.
But I do. I mean, the reveal that the whole thing was actually done by Mischief as part of the Art Basel installation next week would be funny.
Yeah.
It's also interesting though too, to your comment about the LinkedIn feed, just how deep in our own brains we are in the marketing world, and how much or little anybody else really gives a shit at all. Like when you go home to Moscow and have conversations with friends and family, is any of this on anybody's radar at all?
No. That's what I use to like mentally check myself back into like what matters and what doesn't. And no, it doesn't. Even like my friends in America probably don't know about it unless they work in marketing.
Right. Yeah. It is that is an interesting head check. I mean, speaking of, how are things in Moscow at the moment? How are things feeling in Russia? Is it like normal? Is it fraught? Is it, I don't know what.
It depends on who you ask, really. To me, it's a little depressing just because of how closed off it has become in the past couple of years because of all the brands pulling out and everything.
Right.
But for the most part, I think people kind of just living the same everyday life. It's sort of like happening in the background, same as in America, like people are living, participating in wars, but like life goes on. So
yeah,
for
sure. I mean, I would imagine it's not a dissimilar thing to the aftermath of a hurricane or a natural disaster or something like that. Like you hear the stories from the place are awful, and the stories at home are like, what are we doing for Sweet Green for lunch? Which is not to diminish it at all, but it's everybody lives in their own sort of bubble in reality. It's intriguing though, when as you were growing up, did you live in a Moscow that was like, that felt very global and felt very like outwardly focused?
Yeah, I think especially in like the early 2000s, it was super open. After the 90s, after the Cold War, like the end of the Cold War and Russia opening up to the whole world, it did feel very global. Even if I like walk around now, it just like, like there are shops and everything, and I just feel really sad because if everything was open, if like people connected to culture outside of the world, like if we could travel freely, it would have been just another European city. But unfortunately, because of the politics, it's not like that. It's
For sure. Interesting. I mean, well, I certainly hope, in a world that seems to be trending towards more and more closed systems, I'm like an inveterate believer in the inevitability of globalism. So hopefully we'll get back to that point at some stage. Well, okay, so we do have a framework for this conversation, although we could sit and chat about our various and sundry lives all the time, and that is to kind of go through some of the links that are in the newsletter and to talk about them. You sent me back 5 links that that you thought were interesting, and I was impressed by what I would call the very Catholic mix of them. And that's not capital C Catholic like the church. That's lower C Catholic, like
Yeah.
a wide and diverse mix of stuff. And the first one that you sent me was about how Cafe Gitane has kept its cool for 30 years. Why'd you pick that one? What was interesting about that?
I am really excited. Like, I never got to experience New York when Soho was like populated by artists and it was not like a a mall, an outdoor mall.
Right.
So I feel like I'm really fascinated. I feel like a lot of people like Emily Sandberg is also fascinated by Balthazar and like all these old restaurants. I love the line that they have in the article that they had to open up the credit card, like allow people to use credit cards, which
Right.
invited like finance people and people
Right.
going for like a work coffee in, which totally changed the vibe. And I just like never really thought about it. So yeah, I'm just like I still want to experience some sort of like community that's so like off the phone. Like I feel like everything, even when you start like a shop now, it's probably gonna have an Instagram. You're gonna
Right.
invite your people who like write a Substack or like have an Instagram account as well. And it's never gonna be the same as like just like people in the local neighborhood, and it's all the people living around there coming in for coffee and kind of just like chatting with each other. I
Right.
really like appreciate that vibe, and I'm happy they were able to preserve that over the years. And I'm going to pick up that book. I think there's a book about Balthazar as well, which I'm really interested in.
Oh, is that right?
So,
Yeah. I mean,
yeah.
it makes sense that there would be a Balthazar book. I'm not familiar with it, but so the book is coming out on McNally Jackson's imprint, I think, and is edited by the woman who is the general manager of Cafe Gitane, who happens to be 22 years. She's 22, and she
Yeah.
grew up in the cafe, which like
Yeah, I love that.
that little full circle moment is cool. The other thing that was interesting about that article was that Luke Levy, I'm not sure how he says his name, who is the founder owner of Cafe Gitane, talks about how it was super dead when he first opened. There was nothing going on. Nolita was this neighborhood of Italian, native New Yorkers or Italian Americans who were in rent stabilized apartments and never moved. And his first employee was Sean Marshall, aka the musician Cat Power, who we had to send home on the first day. But and then there's a New York Times article that sort of creates a wave. And that article is linked in the Eater piece that you're referring to. And if you read that article, I don't know if you dug into the substrate there and look at that article, but that article says very blithely, Little Italy is occupied by families living in rent stabilized apartments, and it will never change. And you're
That's
like,
awesome.
Actually, it will. It will. It
Yeah.
not only will it change, it will be changed irrevocably within 5 years. Because by the time I got to New York, that was a thing, and Japan was a fashion destination and all this sort of stuff. So it's amazing that it's been as durable as it has. Have you been to Japan? Do you have an order?
No, I haven't been. I'm gonna go
you gotta
now.
go.
Yeah.
Actually, a tip both for you and for those listening. The outpost that they now have in Vinegar Hill, right, which is the neighborhood a little bit north of Dumbo in Brooklyn, has that outposty, nothing around, very neighborhoody kind of feeling. So if you wanted to sort of touch what the vibe was like in the late 90s, you could probably visit over there and get a sense. Cool. Okay, so then you go straight from the little neighborhood cafe with the cool vibe to Neon getting $200 million from Comerica and being funded. There's a cultural through line there and a storytelling through line that I think was interesting. But what was it about that Neon story?
Yeah, I heard for a while that those like small distribution and I guess now they're production companies like A24, Neon. People were saying that they're not very good at marketing their movies for a little while, but now I feel like
the CMO at Neon is a friend of mine, and
Oh,
he will be sad to. No. But look, if that's the reputation, that's the reputation.
No,
So
but I'm
Parks,
genuinely
work
confused
on it.
about it because I feel like now, and I mentioned this in my last week's piece, all the movies that I hear about come from Neon or Utopia or A24. Like, we don't really talk about Warner Brothers, like, big production or anything like that. So
you're not part of the Glicked discourse?
what? No.
This is like the Gladiator Wicked thing. Yeah.
No. I do want to see Gladiator. But yeah, it's just like, I guess like the power of maybe them sticking to community and kind of like growing more organically, maybe that helped. But it was just strange. I do want to like investigate what happened and their approach to marketing movies. So I thought it was interesting.
The thing that I think is interesting about those companies, A24 and Neon being good examples of it, A24 being the better example probably, is the way in which they create a sort of lifetime value or a lifetime relationship with audiences around their titles. Like I by happenstance just bought a midsummer Christmas tree topper that A24 made available. Now, Midsummer is a movie from what, 5 years ago, thereabouts. Why they would introduce a new consumer product in 2020 for Christmas of 2024 for a movie that came out about May 1st 5 years ago, I don't know, but I appreciate the fact that there's a through line there and that they're encouraging people go back to the film and so on and so forth. They're just better. They're better. Weirdly, given that the Marvel Cinematic Universe becomes this template for the ways that you go to market across multiple touch points, the indies are better at creating the universe and extending in that way. Do you get, I mean, in your work, do you get people, let's call it, marketers or brand officers or whomever who go, how do we become A24? I hear that a lot.
I only heard that about that book company, the A31, is it called?
I don't know that one.
Emily wrote about it, but they write like they're very like their marketing is very downtown heavy. I feel like they've sent a book to everyone I know or follow on Instagram.
Guys, I'm feeling very lonely. Dear book company whose name I don't know, please send me books.
Yeah.
I love books.
They write. I think they're focused on
Look
romance.
at all those books, guys. Come on, send me some books.
I don't know if you're the target audience for.
Oh, really? Okay, fine. All right. This is the Gen X white guy gets excluded again. Darn it.
Yeah. They write like they publish small sort of novellas, I guess they are.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
They're romance focused. And they produce a lot of merch alongside of that. So for example, if a story uses like a sharing one bed because motel only has one room plot, like it's a common plot. I don't know what books you read. But they have like they give out with a book, they give out a motel like keychain, so you kind of like immerse yourself into the story with all these like little trinkets that they send you alongside of that. But Emily actually wrote,
and then that becomes a bag charm, and you just sort of you go down.
And every story like uses a new trope, and they come up with new merch about it. So yeah, it's kind of like building out the universes, sort of like you said, A24 is doing, for example. So their positioning is very clearly to be like A24 books.
Right.
Yeah, but outside of that, I don't know if I've really heard that.
Yeah, I don't think it's not a question. It's not like it was in 2016 where people are going, I want to be the Uber of X, right? That sort of like famous trope. It's more just going, A24 has captured a really interesting dynamic around IP generation leading to lots of other consumer touch points that then further spin out value, and it's more trying to chase the model than it is the be the A24 for candles or be the A24 for
I don't know if that's new necessarily. Isn't that how movie business works in general? You just make a movie, you make merch alongside of that, you spin up the IP. in many ways.
Well, yeah, I guess so. But I mean, I think it's easy to. And have you watched one? Speaking of that, there's an HBO series called The Franchise.
No.
That's on. It just the first season just ended on Sunday, but it was executive produced by Armando Iannucci, who was the guy behind Veep and The State of Things, which is or I think it was called The State of Things, which is like a British version that predated Veep. Anyway, very incisive political wit, obsessed with the inner workings of like cultural systems, let's call them. And in the series, they are making a Marvel cinematic universe like second tier film, let's call it. So it's like Ant-Man, right? They're making
Oh,
Ant-Man.
okay.
They're not making
Yeah.
Avengers. And the one of the guys who's effectively like the villain in the series walks around and he's always switching hats because to represent the movie that he's most nearly working with. And so you just see like these little merch moments. They're easy to create, right? You have a brand logo and you get it done. What A24 is good at, and what I think the most interesting brands in culture are good at, is finding ways to flip that IP in a fashion that makes it less of a layup and more of a conversation. Hence the Midsummer Tree Topper and that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
Well, anyway, it's intriguing. Do you find, or do you consider content consumption a responsibility of your job or life or output?
No.
Okay.
It depends on the content. I used to feel like, well, I used to run Twitter accounts for brands, so I used to feel like I need to know exactly what's going on Twitter. I would check it every day, in the morning for 30 minutes and at night for 30 minutes.
Okay, got it.
So I was very systematic about it. And then I worked a lot with TikTok creators. So I felt like it was my responsibility to know what's going on every single day. I haven't had TikTok on my phone for a couple of years, maybe.
Interesting. What drove you to the precipice?
I got so overwhelmed, to be honest. I've scaled a creator program from 0 to like 100 plus creators in about like 4 to 5 months. So I was just so overwhelmed. They were all like the same category of like lifestyle creator, which gets really repetitive. So I just felt like I wasn't really content I was missing out on. I think I realized like a lot of what's going on the surface level on social media, you can actually skip and like you will hear it one way or another. Like your friend will send you a meme or something, or you will hear it from a newsletter or something like that. But I'm interested in like different things that are different from it and like a level or two deeper. So I don't feel like I'm missing out on anything that really matters.
What drives that interest in that second layer or third layer down? Like where does that curiosity come from?
I think selfishly, I just want to cover things that most people can't find. And I feel like it's one of the links I actually sent you for this. But sort of like not a lot of people are willing to dig under the algorithm and like dive into like someone's following list to find like a cool gem in it, because it takes time, it takes effort, but I feel like it's really valuable now because a lot of people I see like scroll their For You page and then share the stuff that they see that they think they discovered, but it was actually just served to them. So yeah, just very selfish.
No. I mean, but listen, I think it's interesting, right? Like I often attribute my curiosity in those things to growing up as a skateboarder. It's like you learn to see the world in a different way, right? Like physical structures take on different meanings and take on different possibilities, and so you sort of always look at things from maybe a 15 or 20 degree different angle. I think the piece that the article that you're referring to was something that my buddy Gordon Hall sent me, but it was this filmmaker Kirby Ferguson, who is arguing that our culture often appears to be plagued by a dearth of creativity, but actually below the surface, creativity is thriving. You just have to sort of look for it. Is that right? Is that the one you were talking about?
Yeah.
So it's an interesting one. Like, on the one hand, I thought that film was cool. On the other hand, it struck me as a sort of a weird argument against itself, because actually the content that looked the best was the stuff that was closest to the surface.
But like aesthetically?
Yeah, it felt like the production value. I don't know. It was weird. It was like he sort of undermined his argument by the choices of image, and I don't know. I thought that was interesting.
Yeah,
How did it strike you?
I was reading the subtitles because I couldn't watch it with the sound, so I think I was
I see. Okay.
too focused on getting the idea rather than looking at visuals. I think I just consumed it as if it was like a video on my Reels page, so I didn't think of it as a film.
Yeah, I mean, look, because I think it's because it's a I don't know. I thought the argument was interesting, where it's like, on the one hand, of course, the most interesting stuff is a little bit below the surface. Like, who needs to be told that? But then, actually, you and I come from a position of just sort of intrinsically knowing that, and lots of people, I guess, do need to be reminded of that.
Yeah.
Which is sort of sad in a respect, but it's also that's kind of our jobs too, right?
Yeah, I think my generation also gets blamed a lot for not having culture, or like not being, I don't know, like not having any communities or anything that's like, older generation knows like fringe culture,
Sure.
which I found for a long time very annoying. And I have a piece that's sort of similar to what that film is arguing. Sort of like, if you feel like there is no culture, then you're kind of telling on yourself, because it means that you're not making any effort to look below the surface, because why would you expect culture to be served to you? I feel like a lot of, like, with social media and the For You pages and everything, people don't want to dig. Like, they just expect everything to be like served up to them for their entertainment. But actually, like, being culture and participating in culture, it takes a lot of work.
Yeah, 100%. It's I don't know that you're aware of this, but I have an 18-year-old son and a 15-year-old daughter, and one of the things that I've been emphasizing to them a lot lately is that this old truism of 90% of life is showing up. It's like you gotta actually get out and just do it. And we have the privilege of being here in New York City, in the center of everything. Like, there's so much that they can just experience by just literally setting foot outside the front door. Do you feel like, and notwithstanding the joke I made about myself earlier, the whole idea of these kind of generational politics it seems a little stupid and reductive to me. But I wonder to what extent you feel like people in your friend group, your age cohort, your people at your experience level or whatever, have started to twig to the notion that you have to get out and do that, or if it still feels like it's just a select few that have figured it out.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, like, people that I know that work in creative fields, they are kind of doing it because it's their job a little bit. But I also have a lot of friends who just have like what you would call a regular job. Like, someone is a teacher, or someone, I don't know, is like works at a hospital, and they do a lot of like community stuff. They have more hobbies than I do.
Oh, really? Interesting.
Yeah. They're showing up to like
they don't have
local...
to check Twitter twice a day, right?
Yeah,
so it's
they don't. So they have that time saved on me. But yeah, they would show up to like, someone got really into like rock climbing to the point where like she's going out like in the wilds climbing rocks, like not just in the gym in Brooklyn. Yeah.
Sure.
Which is a wild thing. Then like people are organizing like community events, participating in like, I don't know, like food pantry programs and stuff like that. So I feel like a lot of people are actually, I don't know, I mean, I guess they wouldn't be my friend if they weren't getting out of the house and doing things. So maybe I'm a little biased. But I feel like it's unfair that a lot of people kind of like point to Gen Z and say like, oh, all you do is like be on your phone and argue on the internet and everything. No, we do things.
Oh, no, of course. I mean, look, again, all of those, I think a lot of those arguments are pretty
Yeah.
reductive. And one thing that I noticed from my kids, who are certainly much closer in age to you than they are to me, than you are to me, is that they have it feels like they've sort of learned to hear arguments like that with a healthy degree of skepticism, and then to
Yeah.
decide, like, okay, yeah, that's representative or it's not. And then of course, we have a great time going back and forth and doing, brain rot slang and trying to figure out to what extent people say these things or do these things or don't. How about you? I mean, do you in your professional capacity, do you feel like you have to you have a certain responsibility to, I don't know, what, represent a Gen Z point of view, or I don't know what, like, defend where you're coming from, or not?
I think I like some people would want to brand themselves as Gen Z because, like I said, like on tech Twitter, for example, you could be a Gen Z VC and you would automatically get attention because older people with money and opportunities kind of want that participation from the younger kids, like
Yeah, for sure.
association with the younger kids. I try just not to say anything about what generation I'm from. Of course, sometimes like I feel a little like I feel a little out of my depth just because I'm like having a realization, but I understand that like people before me have had this realization, so it's not groundbreaking at all.
Right.
Yeah, I'm like out here like, oh guys, there's culture behind below the surface, and they're like,
Right.
yeah, sure. So yeah, that's the only thing. But yeah, I kind of try to stay away from that generational discourse in general.
Yeah, I wonder. I mean, you when we talked at the beginning, or when we were talking at the beginning, you talked about a little bit about being, especially in that tech Twitter
Yeah,
conversation, like,
resident young
venerated as a
person.
young person who had a point of view and a voice, and so on and so forth. So I
Yeah.
wonder to what extent, it's like,
Yeah.
you that becomes your, you know personal brand or responsibility, or whatever the case is. Well, I want to ask the next wild swing in your story selection was to the Drake Kendrick Lamar,
Yeah.
the Drake suit against UMG, Universal Music Group, about the idea that UMG, which is also Drake's label, manipulated its economic relationship with Spotify to promote Kendrick Lamar's "Not Like Us" unfairly into Spotify. What jumped at you about that story? What was it that you wanted to talk about?
I love that whole conflict. It was a very entertaining couple of days on social media,
Right.
just seeing just random guys in their apartments reacting to this. Like this was like groundbreaking. I like that Kendrick got, I think he got a Super Bowl, right? Performance out of this.
Well, whether it was out of that or not, he got a Super Bowl performance. So yeah, like,
Yeah, which seems really strange because I feel like Kendrick, like, if anything, like Drake is more pop than Kendrick.
yeah,
I
for sure.
don't see Kendrick performing for like the Americans. But in general, I like the story because I feel like there is a lot of power that Spotify has over music distribution these days.
Yes.
And at some point, I feel like it was actually a good place to discover music in like 2019, 2020. I found a lot of good music. But I feel like now with TikTok being hooked up to Spotify in some way and all those like massive listenership to specific artists that tend to
Right.
be pop artists, I feel like it's become really, really hard to like get through, like break through that algorithm kind of sludge situation. I really liked I think his name is Kyle Chaika, right?
Kyle Chayka,
The
sure. Yeah.
Yeah, yes. I love that like he pointed out that like we used to buy CDs and have a sort of different relationship with music
Mm-hmm.
that was more tactile, and now we don't really value this because it's gonna like we're streaming music and it's unlimited. And yeah, it just like got me thinking about how I consume music, how I discover artists.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I just feel like Spotify is kind of in a very like evil stage of its existence. And
It's funny you should say that. Really interesting. Yeah, I mean,
yeah,
look, the story to me, underlines the idea that at what is driving all of these macro trends are economic incentives, right? Like
yeah,
when it really comes down to it, what UMG is accused of doing is taking a lower royalty rate on Kendrick Lamar's music as an incentive to promote it and to rank it higher in the algorithms and make it easier for discovery and so on and so forth. And music is such an emotional territory for most people that you want things to work because they resonate
yeah.
emotionally, not because
Not
they
because
resonate
someone gamed it.
economically.
Yeah,
But the truth of the matter is that the music business is a business, and that
yeah,
these little, like, fraction of a penny discounts on streaming royalties are the things that make a Super Bowl act. To your point, it's it is remarkable. It's funny. I'm struck by your saying, though, that you think Spotify's in sort of an evil place. It strikes me as one that is just, it is held in a balance that is equal parts good and evil depending on where you encounter it. And for me, that comes to life in a place as simple as my Discover Weekly and my New Music Weekly. I went. Funny enough, it was actually I was invited to a lunch that Kyle Chayka spoke at. It was the sort of the guest of honor, and they in the lunch we were asked the question, what is an algorithm you love and what is an algorithm you hate? And I love my Discover Weekly algorithm. Like, it consistently turns. I'm pretty well read with music, and it consistently turns me on to new stuff that I like and
yeah.
I find interesting and I discover. And I really dislike my New Music Friday algorithm because it gives me the same dumb shit all the time, including stuff that I actively don't like, but that I can't figure out how to, you
Get
know what I
rid of.
mean?
Yeah, yeah.
Like,
Get out of the
downvote
system.
or whatever. So it's really interesting that these two things that work in opposition to one another are held by the same company and operate theoretically the same way. It's bizarre.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, so speaking of discovery, one thing that the reason I asked you to join me today, and one of the things that I love about Vic's Busy Corner is that I discover things through it. Where do you discover things? What are your sort of go-to sources? And feel free to keep your proprietary information to yourself if you'd like. But
Proprietary information. I just like going by like networks of people. So if I find one interesting person, I would literally just go through the people that they follow and the people that they like connect with,
okay.
and then go from there. So I've kind of like just expand my net in the kind of infinity direction. Yeah, that's literally just it. I just look at a lot of people's profiles, see what they do, see what work resonates with me, because I feel like New York creative scene in general is very much I feel like it gets small when people talk
Yeah.
about the same like 10 people or 20 people all the time. Like they get invited to all the events and stuff. And it's not usually like sometimes it's not the most interesting people as well. So
Sure.
it's nice to like dig below the surface and find people that maybe are not so good at like promoting themselves or networking on being in the right place and at the right time, but are just like focused on doing really interesting work. So yeah, if someone's work resonates with me, I don't really care like who they're followed by or anything. I will reach out to them, like ask questions, has to be on my newsletter.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, okay, and then when you do that outreach, it informs the newsletter, Vic's Busy Corner, but then also you were talking about busycorner.xyz, which is a like a research site. Tell me about that. What's the thrust there?
I just wanted to do like I just figured that I'm really good at research, and when it comes to the newsletter, I don't care so much about like sharing my opinion really, or maybe even like curation side of it. I don't really love the writing. I feel I just treat it as like the medium in which I communicate, but I
Mhm.
really love the research part, and I'm really good at like spotting people who go like unnoticed sort of. So I wanted to kind of go deeper into that. And I feel like a lot of like when I worked in marketing full time too, and like still work freelance, it's a lot of power to have like lists of, vendors and lists of like interesting people you can tap in for like collaboration at any moment.
Sure.
So just like having that directory, that's very like useful, and usable, is very nice. So I just wanted to create that for other people and selfishly for myself as well, because I feel like I would have benefited from this.
Yeah, it feels like, I think, and it touches a little bit on your reference about, peers of yours doing community service and that sort of stuff earlier. But there is a little bit of an underlying, I want to call it like a filter network where people like yourself have, and like I think of Julia Harrison from Saloon, for instance, as well, like who've started to go, I can aggregate information in a way that is useful to me, is useful to people like me, and the net gain of sharing that stuff is much greater than the net benefit of keeping it to myself and holding it as proprietary. Which I mean, as somebody who publishes a newsletter, partially to scrape the plaque off my brain every week, but also partially because I want people to understand the patterns that I'm seeing so that I don't have to sit around and explain them to them all the time. I understand the impulse, but it's nice that, like, I came to this 25 years on in a career, whereas you've arrived at it immediately, which I think is cool.
Yeah, I just feel like, especially transitioning from working in tech and trying to get more into like creative industries like fashion or beauty, it's really tough to like find a starting place, a starting point. Unless you go to a FIT or NYU or something, you don't really know where to start. So I just feel like I wanted to like provide resources and like starting points for people who don't feel like it's an industry like fashion, for example. It's a very like elitist in a way sort of thing. Like you feel a lot of FOMO if you don't know what's going on, if you don't know how to pronounce like brand names and stuff. So I just wanted to be the person who is like, it's okay. Like I didn't know this 2 months ago, and now we know.
It's funny. I was walking through Soho the other day, and I was messing with my son and being like, "What do you think of Givenchy?" And he's like, "It's Givenchy, Dad." I was like, "All right, cool. Just testing.
Yeah.
Well, that's fascinating. Who else do you look at that strikes you as a bright light in that regard? Like, we talked about Emily a minute ago. I mentioned Julia. Like, who else do you look at and kind of go, that person's got something happening?
I think maybe Emilia from Shoprat. I like
This
that
is Emilia Petrarca.
Yeah. I like that she focuses on just like a random glove store in Milan. I love that. I want to go there. You
want to go to the glove?
I don't want to go to a pop-up in Soho.
Yeah.
But besides that, I don't know. I guess I just like don't really look at people. Like I try to stay away from people who aggregate stuff for me. I try to look. I'm more interested in like people doing creative work, because I feel like that's not something I'm really good at, like artists and photographers and stuff. So I want to learn about that more. And like I said, I feel like there are a lot of like brand marketing or culture resources, but they sort of just scrape the surface of what they're like served by the algorithm. So it's a little tough.
I am constantly trying to mix discovery in ways that are both programmatic and serendipitous, right?
Yeah.
Like on the one hand, I want to, the origin story of my newsletter is that I spend 2 hours reading the internet every morning as a practice. It's my coffee. It's how I,
Your 30
launch
minutes
into the
on
day.
Twitter.
and I just started like picking out links and setting them aside for people when I found myself having to explain things too much. By the same token, I went to the Chelsea art fair on Saturday, which was this little 5-gallery or 6-gallery fair organized by Platform Art in the Chelsea Hotel, which was deeply, deeply underwhelming. But I found a little flyer outside, a picture of pansies, and the artist on the back. I guess maybe the artist was not in the show, but maybe had been there like handing out flyers or whatever earlier, and I ended up discovering this painter, J.K. Park, I think. I'll put it in the show notes. Who paints pansies, and it was just like, okay, great. Like this is the mixture I want. Like I want to know that I have sources that I can count on, and I want to be able to just like literally pick a flyer up off the street and go, oh, cool. This is awesome. Is that how you sort of approach things as well, or are you the other way around? Do you pick things up off the street and then find out where they lead online?
Yeah, I feel like with discovery, especially, like if you discover something on the internet, you can see right away, like followed by, for example, and you kind of get that buy-in, like, oh, okay, like other people care about this. But when you discover something like a flyer on the street, it's up to you to decide like how much you want to value this, because there is no sign off on it. And I think that's like, I kind of was thinking about this with brands, because in Moscow, for example, we have like all the brands are out of here. So I'm kind of like a blind person here. I don't know what's going on. So if I want to buy a shirt, I got to decide if I think it's good quality or if it's well made, and kind of decide from there. So I think that's interesting. But I was going to say, I'm also very excited about people like curators. For example, this guy, he does the account Director Fits. I don't know if you've seen it, but he posts about Director Fits.
Yeah, sure.
He said on a podcast that he like goes to some library in LA and just goes through the archive. And I think that's really cool, because not a lot of people would just repost stuff that they find on the internet. And I feel like there is a lot of value now in like going to New York Public Library and looking at their like photo archive for the references for a project, because no one else is going to do that. So I'm really interested in people like that, and I think I'm going to bring them to my newsletter more often now, so I can spotlight them.
Yeah, it's funny. It's a unique privilege of my age that I remember.
Yeah, just doing this.
Well, no. Well, both right. I remember both that behavior, but also that I remember enough things that existed in a pre-digital context that have never been digitized.
Mm-hmm.
That I can go back and be like, oh, the archives of Grand Royal magazine, for instance, have never been digitized in a way that is actually like web friendly or whatever. People have done scanned PDFs and this kind of thing, but like so you remember little details like that and kind of go, oh right, there's a thing. But for you, not necessarily knowing those things, being able to discover them is like the serendipity involved there has got to be
I've
amazing,
been to the library before, but yeah.
Oh no, I don't mean that. I just mean like the notion that you can step into that context and discover something that is so acutely the thing you were thinking about that existed before in a way that you just were totally unaware of. It's kind of awesome. I was talking at breakfast this morning. Here's a question for you. As an analyst of trends or of marketing moves, I was talking at breakfast this morning about whether or not there are trends or styles that are permanently dead, that will stay dead forever from now. And it was prompted because we were talking about, I can't remember. I can't remember what sparked the conversation, but we were talking about zoot suits, right? Like the style of very high waisted, very voluminous men's suiting that was worn in the 40s. That you'd think like it's just an impractical way of dressing; it'll never come back. And yet, Willie Chervaria's entire new show that won the CFDA award was kind of informed by this. We were trying to think of things that will stay dead forever. I came up with powdered wigs. I don't.
I don't know what that is, first of all.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh no, powdered wigs like the justices in
Oh, they're called powder wigs. Okay.
yeah,
I
yeah, yeah.
just
I
thought
mean,
it
they
was a
wear them in
wig.
English courts now, but otherwise, like that used to be a
Yeah.
thing. People would wear those around all the time.
Yeah. I feel like there will be, I guess, like you said, there are things that are not digitized, like a lot of probably like old magazines, like old references. You got to go to the archive or something to
Yeah.
discover them. That's really hard. But I feel like there will be, like you said, like a fashion student is going to go to the archive and discover that and maybe bring it back. Maybe it's a matter of like functionality of like
Yeah.
how we wear stuff, but we are going to see that maybe like in a magazine, in magazine cover shoot or something,
Right.
like a lot of,
Or in a Jaguar rebrand.
yeah,
It'll
yeah.
end up
Yeah, and then everyone will write a LinkedIn post about it, and then you won't be able to not hear about it. That's the thing.
Oh man. Well, that brings us. Given that brings us full circle, Viktoriia. This is a good place to
Jaguar rebrand that stuff.
go back. It's all the Jaguar rebrand in the end,
Yeah.
And then we'll report next week on the big, troll reveal moment at Art Basel.
Yeah.
But listen, thank you very much for being here with me today. It's been fun to chat with you and to kind of get a sense of it. So people should find you at Vik's Busy Corner newsletter, right? Which is Vik's VIKS Busy Corner at .substack, right?
No, it's .com.
Okay, so vicsbusycorner.com and then busycorner.xyz.
XYZ.
Got it. And that's the research and the resource.
Yep.
Cool. Well, and then of course you are also, given that you are a freelance out in the world, you are entertaining conversations, I would presume, about, jobs and assignments and all of that sort of stuff. So we can hit you up for professional connection as well too.
Yes.
Awesome.
Cool.
Well, okay. So everybody, this has been Viktoriia Vasileva.
Very good. Yes.
Cool. Okay. Good. Medium good. And thanks for being here on TikTok, Viktoriia.
Yeah,
We'll talk to you again soon.
Thank you for having me.
You're welcome. Bye.